Thank you very much, Assembly Member. I'm going to stick with that habit. And thank you to the UC Student Center. I'm so thrilled, as a very proud UC alum, to see UC playing this role here in Sacramento with these policy and political conversations, and just for all of you for showing up, convening for this great conversation, and to you, to Mayor Villaraigosa, for coming down and ready to submit yourself to some fun questions. You know, one of your signature phrases back from when you were mayor of Los Angeles was "dream with me." And that became sort of shorthand for your vision of the city, the ambitions you had for the city. And so I'm wondering now, as you are launching this gubernatorial bid, if you were going to try and distill your campaign into a similar kind of catchphrase, what would it be?
First of all, thank you. Testing, yes. First of all, thank you for inviting me. Assembly Member Baker, where are you? Ah, she left. Guess she didn't want to hear. No, thank you. We actually worked together with an organization that she was working with on infrastructure, and I can tell you, did a great job, and so thank you for inviting me. Everybody else got a friend of theirs to moderate. I get Ms. Mason from Politico, right? I love it, and really do, because I've watched you and read your articles, and when you were at the Times, and certainly now at Politico, and it's an honor to be here with you. Let me say something about Dream With Me in LA first. I said, dream with me. We'll make LA the cleanest, greenest big city in America. LA's public utility was one of the dirtiest in the United States of America, more than 50% reliant on coal, not just other fossil fuels, on coal, the dirtiest fossil fuel. I took us #1 American city in reducing carbon emissions, #5 in the world. Our effort to clean up the port was the most far-reaching effort anywhere in the world. We used the same amount of water in 2013 when I left that we did in 1970 when we had 1 million less people. I said, dream with me. We'd make our schools a better place. 1 out of 3 schools were failing when I became mayor. By the time I left, it was 1 out of 10. A 60% increase in the graduation rate. And in a city where half the city, the San Fernando Valley, wanted to secede, nobody is talking about secession any longer. I said, dream with me. We'll make LA one of the safest big cities in the country. Almost everybody laughed, if you pan the audience, because at that time, we were one of the most violent big cities. By the time I left, LA was the safest, along with New York, the safest big city in America, 1950 safe, nearly a 50% drop in violent crime. And finally, I said, in a city committed to the single passenger automobile, let's build a subway to the sea. Let's build again. I'm gonna make the crane the official bird of Los Angeles, and we did. We built more infrastructure than virtually any city in the United States of America. So I'm someone who believes that part of your job is to close your eyes and imagine. And so if I were to answer your question, one, it starts, I'm a practical, proven problem solver. That's how I got the kind of accomplishments. And by the way, I didn't say dream with me when I was speaker, but I got 2 budgets on time with a surplus, more money for education and public safety, and I got it when we only had 42 votes and 48 votes, not the supermajority they have today. I work with people that I don't always agree with. But dream with me. Close your eyes for a moment and think about a California where you and your children, you and your families feel safer, where they feel like government is working again. Part of this campaign is about restoring the notion that we need competence in our government, whether it's public safety, whether it's education, whether it's homelessness and housing. You're going to see someone who's focused on results, not ideology, not just ideas, but actually wants to get things done. I'll speak more to the specifics of that if you want. But yes, I want to improve the quality of life of more Californians. 6 years ago, I said at the Democratic Convention, and today, virtually everyone is saying that, I said we can't just be a party of people that drive a Tesla and not a Toyota pickup or ride a bus like my mother did. I want an economy that's working. Dream with me. I want an economy that's working for more people who work every single day and can't afford the cost of gas or groceries or eggs. And so, thank you for that question.
Didn't mean to tee you up quite like that, but you were ready to go. But let's say two words that don't necessarily go hand in hand would be dreams and pragmatic. I don't think anybody said I'd had the most incredible pragmatic dream last night. And yet that, I think, is the word that you have. You brought it up just now. In your launch video, you called yourself a pragmatic problem solver.
A proven problem solver.
Proven problems. There are a lot of alliteration going on. But pragmatic was another word that had been in there. So how can you square that? Can you be both pragmatic and a dreamer?
Actually, I just shared just some of the accomplishments, and there's a lot more, by the way. But back then, at that inaugural speech, I said I called myself a practical progressive. Now I'm focused on proven problem solver, because when I said dream with me, we actually accomplished a lot of what we said we were going to do. And so I don't think being practical is antithetical to be a dreamer. If you ever played, I was a third string halfback, everybody, and a third string linebacker. But when you get the ball, you're thinking of a touchdown, but all you need is 4 yards. When you're at bat, you're thinking of dreaming of hitting a home run, but all you have to do is get on base. And so I don't think practical and dream are antithetical to one another. I actually think they can be helpful, because the best way to get to that dream is not to be an ideologue, to be a practical person, to work across the aisle, to get things done. Results matter, everybody. Competence matters.
Okay, so let's sort of pick apart then what it means to be a pragmatic problem solver. So let's take, for example, you mentioned public safety. I know that was something that you worked quite a bit on when you were mayor. So if you were elected governor, how would this approach of pragmatic problem solving, practical problem solving, play out in terms of improving the public safety in this state?
First of all, I just want to remind everybody, Assemblymember Baker came back in. I was joking. I guess she didn't want to hear. And since we're on TV, I want to make sure that everybody knows you're here. The specifics, I'll tell you how I did it. In a city that was the most under-policed big city in the country, a city of 4,456 square miles, I said, we need constitutional community policing. The only way we can get to that is to have more cops. Because if they're just driving in cars and responding to emergencies and not able to get out of those cars and talk to and listen to their neighbors, they're not going to figure out what the big issues are, how they resolve those problems. So I grew the police department by 1,000 officers. I took guns off the streets of LA. I dramatically expanded after-school programs, dramatically expanded summer youth jobs. I put together, and when I say I didn't do any of that by myself, everybody. We did it. But since I'm speaking, I'll use that pronoun. I said, we need an all-of-the-above approach to addressing crime. We need to be smart on crime, not just talk tough. And that's why when I say nearly 50%, I think the actual number was a 48% drop in violent crime to 1950 levels.
But let's spin that forward then to as governor. I mean, you're not going to be overseeing the police budgets of every municipality in the state. You know, there's still going to be local jurisdiction about this. So what, as a governor, would you do to be a practical problem solver?
I just outlined what I did, and I intend to incentivize cities and mayors to do the same thing.
You were the only...
Because it's proven that we were able to do this with constitutional and community policing, with a commitment that nobody is above the law, not a politician, not a priest, not a police officer.
You were the only Democrat in the field so far to take a position in favor of Prop 36 last year, which obviously passed overwhelmingly with the voters. Why do you think you were on an island among Democrats in taking that position?
Well, that's a better question to ask. That's a better question to ask the other candidates, but I was real clear. I believe in accountability, everybody. People said, well, Mayor, it was safer, it was more violent when you became mayor than it is today. And I said, well, people don't feel that way. The newspaper, the Record said, it's not a solution. I think they said something to the effect, it's not a solution that it was a, problems. I don't remember exactly, but I'll say this. What was clear to me, people don't feel safe. And when I looked at Prop 36, I said, hold it. You're selling small drugs, you get arrested. You're either selling or ingesting small drugs, small amount of drugs. You do it once, you don't get rehab. You refuse rehab. You do it twice, you don't get rehab. You do it 3 times, yeah, you're going to jail. If you don't do rehab, folks, what I've said about homelessness and crime, I'm not for criminalization, I am for compassion, but I'm not for chaos. And what we have on the streets of California is chaos. You can't sell drugs on the open market. Sorry. You can't have encampments in front of schools and parks because we know what neighborhoods they're going to be in. So I'm challenging what's broken, not as an ideologue, but as someone who wants to get things done. So, I got behind it. I don't know why the others didn't, but it was clear. 71% of California got behind it. 80% of Republicans, 64% of Democrats. Every demographic group said, enough is enough. Slow it down. And that's what I did. And by the way, I didn't just say after the fact, as some have done, that they were for it. I actually did a commercial in English and Spanish, by the way.
I promise we will return to policy substance, but I'm a political hack, and so I have to ask a political question. So in recent elections, we've seen the formula for statewide elections for Democrats. You run to the left, you raise a bunch of money, and you elevate a Republican that you can drag along with you into the top 2, and then you have a pretty easy walk to November. We saw that in 2018. We saw that in last year in the Senate race. How do you, as somebody that's trying to run more towards the center, not get boxed out from that tried and true formula?
Again, people have called it the center. They've called it a lot of things. They've called it Republican. Actually, as I said, I'm a proven problem solver running on a common sense agenda. I think that lane is wider than people think. I think people feel like government's not working at the state level, certainly at the federal level, and at the local level. And I think they want government to work better. They want government to be more efficient. When people have asked me about DOJ, I said, hey, hold it. We shouldn't be knee-jerk against the notion that we should find efficiencies in government, that we should expect governments accountable. Now, clearly what they're doing there is not any of that. Instead of using a scalpel, they're using a chainsaw. And that doesn't work. Instead of studying the problem, not forever, but evaluating and analyzing the problem, they're picking a solution that obviously is way beyond anything called efficiency or accountability. In fact, they're not accountable because they don't even want to give the stats of who they cut, where they're cutting, and the rest of it.
But you still think, despite what has been sort of the furor around Doge and what seems to be kind of a nationalized political environment where maybe people are retreating to their partisan corners because of it, you still think that this more middle lane, whether that's centrist, moderate, what have you, is a viable path?
Again, I don't think it's a centrist path. I think it's a common sense one. And I think there are people on the left and the right that are open to seeing a government and a leader that's focused on efficiency, that's focused on accountability, that wants to focus on results. Yeah, I'm the only one in this Canada with a record as comprehensive as mine. That's just a fact. I'm not making it up. And so, I'm running on that record and what I intend to do for the future. One of the reasons, Assembly Member, that I accepted this, I went to the UCs. I grew up in a tough neighborhood, in a home of domestic violence and alcoholism. I was kicked out of school and dropped out of school. And God is good. America gave me a shot. And an affirmative action program gave me the opportunity to go to UCLA. I tell people, some people think I got in through the back door. But one thing's for sure, I got out the front. And I'll tell you something. I intend to focus on results, to focus on graduation, to focus on the cost of tuition, to focus on things that I think aren't working. Why aren't more kids from California coming into our UCs? They've got a lot of smart people here. It's not going to in any way diminish the quality of research, which could be ended now with what they did at Doge, or the quality of our students. I think we need to reimagine our universities. Arizona State is a great university, last time I looked. And they're doing innovative things that I think we need to take a second look at. We need to talk to students and faculty. We need to talk to the people that work there and the people outside. Where is it working? And that's what I bring. I bring to the table somebody that wants to problem solve.
To get back to policy. Oh, go ahead.
No, never mind.
In 2018, I would say the biggest policy question that defined the race was the question about single-payer healthcare. That doesn't seem like that's going to be so much in the spotlight this time around, although, it's a long time till the primary. Things could change. But there seems to be another healthcare conversation that I would argue is even more pressing, and that's around Medi-Cal. What we heard from state officials recently is that Medi-Cal is facing a $6 billion plus shortfall. And then one of the main drivers of that hole is ensuring immigrants without legal status in this state. Do you think that the state should continue to provide Medi-Cal for undocumented immigrants, given the cost overruns and the ideological hostility that we're facing from the Trump administration?
Well, first of all, let me say that in the last election, I took umbrage with all the Democratic candidates who talked about single payer. And that's the word. And what I said to them, all of them, I said, it's just talk. Am I ideologically against government paid for health care? Of course not. That's what Medicare is. That's what Medicaid and Medi-Cal are. I'm not ideologically against it. At the time, it was a $380 billion price tag. You need the federal government to approve your plan. And what I said is, why don't we provide more coverage to people? Why don't we fix the broken Medi-Cal system where reimbursement rates are too low? This time around, that question was asked again. The 4 candidates who were in back in September all said, therefore, single payer. Single payer has a $550 billion price tag to it, everybody. Our budget is $300 billion. They're smoking pot, man. Yeah, they are. They're smoking pot, and it's
which is legal.
Yeah, there's nothing wrong with it. I've opined on that subject from time to time. More than once. Actually inhaled. But at the end of the day, those same people, 2 of those 4 said they're for single payer, everybody. You got to hear this. Everybody knows the biggest issue is access, because you can't, many doctors will not see Medi-Cal patients. So they were asked, single payer, they're all for it. But they weren't for raising the Medi-Cal reimbursement rate. You know what that said to me? You're not serious. If you're serious, let's stop, with the performance art, and let's deal with the problem. Now, I'm going to answer your question. At the end of the day, why did the legislature move to provide health care to the undocumented? Because they're using our healthcare system anyway. They're using it in emergency hospitals, driving the cost because they wait. They don't have a primary doctor. They don't have somebody. They wait until they're really, really sick. And so the cost of, of their medical care goes out of the roof. So I do believe, like those who said they're for single payer, that healthcare is a right, not a privilege. We got to provide it to our residents. So at the end of the day, I believe there is an economic reason, not just a humane one, for doing it. And the economic reason is they're already using our system and they're skyrocketing the emergency care because they don't get care before that.
So if I understand you correctly,
I was pretty clear, but
well, sure. So
I know you have another question. I know you have another question.
It sounds like you see the economic upside to continuing to cover these undocumented immigrants.
I think I was clear on that.
You were, but again, there's a $6 billion plus shortfall in this current year's budget. So how do you solve that problem? You seem to be talking about long-term economic benefit, but there's a short-term budget problem.
No, it's actually a short-term and a long-term economic benefit, Melanie. Let's be clear about that. And I'll tell you how you do it. I intend, look, I'm not governor, and there's going to be a budget this year, and then the budget when I become governor. I will be able to look at where's the fat? Where can we find efficiencies? How should we be using technology to drive down costs? What are we doing with respect to telemedicine, as an example, to drive down costs? I know a little bit about healthcare. I worked for Altamed. I worked for federally qualified Health Connects. I worked for LA Cares. I can tell you, I'm the author of Healthy Families. 750,000 kids got health care, and I did it with a Republican governor. So I know a little bit about it, and what we'll do is find those efficiencies to provide that care. Now, you just said it. We got an administration that's going to be cutting Medicaid overall. So we'll have to look at how much they cut. All of those things will be relevant. What I won't do is take a position as an ideologue. I'm going to take the position of let's find a place where we can find efficiencies, make the tough decisions we have to make so that people have health care.
Okay, so now that the Trump seal has been broken, let's talk a little bit more about the current occupant of the White House. On election night, we were both at the same election night party, the California Democrats in Los Angeles. The mood was fairly bleak, I would say. And I asked you about California as the state of the resistance, which we saw quite a bit during the first Trump administration. And I asked you, what will it look like for California to be part of the resistance this time around? You said, to paraphrase, basically, the best resistance is us getting our own house in order, making sure that we address the poverty rate, making sure that we address our education system. We're now 2 months into a Trump administration. You have seen how he is approaching the presidency this time around. And so I wonder, do you still believe that? Do you still believe the best resistance is about cleaning up our own house?
First of all, I think Democrats and Republicans are a little fed up with political theater. We got too much of it on both sides of the aisle. Let's be absolutely candid about that. I applaud the legislature and the governor for allocating $50 million for legal expenses with respect to vindicating in the courts California values, California priorities. I want to make sure we're not just doing that in a shotgun way. I want to be surgical. I criticized, I said, you use a scalpel, not a chainsaw. I want to do the same with respect to using the courts. And what I said, so it's not paraphrased, I said the best way to lead the resistance is to improve the quality of life of more Californians. It's to make sure that you, yes, you, can buy a home without your parents' help. It used to be that the California dream was home ownership was part of the California dream. Now for you all, it's renting an apartment with 3 roommates. That's the dream. And I think we can change that. And so lead the resistance by improving our schools. Lead the resistance by making people safe. Lead the resistance by taking on the challenge of homelessness in a compassionate way, in a way that doesn't criminalize, but a way that gets rid of the chaos. Let's fix the problems we face. Because let me be clear about this. They use us as a punching bag, California. They use us as the piñata. Because instead of focusing on those problems, we're screaming at the orange man. You know, we're calling names. You know, you will see a governor who's going to act like a statesman, who will use our courts, who will stand up for our values, but I'm not into theater, everybody. This job is too important. People want you to roll up your sleeves and do what you say.
It seems like what we're seeing from Democratic voters, Democratic base voters at least, throughout the country, but including in California, is a real desire to see a maybe more vigorous fight against the Trump administration. And I'm specifically thinking about the conversation around the government shutdown last week. And what we saw Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer decide to vote for the continuing resolution to keep the federal government open. And he used a practicality argument, right, about the practical effects of a government shutdown. He got a lot of pushback from a lot of people in his party, across the ideological spectrum, I would say. So first of all, I'm just curious, do you agree with Chuck Schumer? Do you think he did the right thing by backing the continuing resolution?
I understand why he did it, though I think he could have explained why he did it better. I think it felt like he didn't put up a big enough fight. Wait till the last minute. We've all been there, everybody. I've been speaker and I've been mayor. And when I negotiate, sometimes you get it done 1 minute before the clock turns. I would have liked to have seen that. I would have liked the House and Senate leadership work together. Minority lead, the Democrats in both houses. At the end of the day, it is a big thing to shut down the government. Without question, we cannot treat that, like it's a small thing. I think in the end, I think he made a mistake because we have never faced a threat to our democracy, to the evisceration of our government, to attacks on Medicare, Medicaid, our veterans, and Social Security like we're seeing today. But, I think it was a closer call than a lot of people think. And, you said respond to the base. Let's be honest. In both parties, the base gets very agitated. They think the way to lead the resistance is to scream at him. I think the way to lead the resistance is to win. And, I became speaker when I got in the legislature. This was a purple state. And I convinced the Democrats, I wasn't the only one, let's go register all those people they want to deny health care to and deny an education of their kids. And we did. And we became a blue state in 1998 by the time I became speaker. I want to win, not be an actor in the political theater.
You talk about how the state has transformed from a purple state into a blue state. It's still a blue state. Let's not overstate things. But after November, I would say it is a redder blue state. There's those shifts that we saw all across
Very
the
clear.
state.
We saw the map.
Yeah. So what's your diagnosis? Why do you think that California has seemed to shift red?
I said it on TV. Look at the Alex Michelson. I said, Democrats think people without a college education are stupid. They're not stupid. Yes, people saw the threat to democracy, but they also see they can't buy a home and they're working every single day, some of them 2 jobs. They saw that the cost of gas in California is astronomical in comparison to other states. They saw a city where it feels like government's not working when it comes to homelessness and safety. And people just said, no, I want to go the other way. I think they were wrong, but they're not stupid. They feel like government's not working for them, and we need to listen. The problem is, leaders are good at talking. Yeah, they're good at communicating. Some are better than others. Part of this job is to listen. Listen to people that you don't agree with. And I'll tell you something, one other thing. I think we need a uniter again. You know what I loved about Obama? He talked about we aren't red states or blue states, we're the United States. I think we need leaders that want to work with the other side of the aisle. Some of them scream a lot like people scream a lot on our side, but there are others that really want to work together. There are conservatives. I said this, you remember when I left the speakership, I said, I've learned a lot. I was the fire-breathing dragon when I got there. That's why I became majority whip 3 weeks after I got there. And then majority leader 2 years later, and speaker a year after that. I said the following, I used to demonize the other side. And then over the years, I realized there are Democrats I vote with every day that I wouldn't invite to my home to dinner. And there are Republicans who I never vote with who I would. I learned that there are good people have R's or D's by their name. They're good, honest people that have different views. We got to work with them. We got to talk to them. We got to listen to them. And I got a track record on that. Talking to different people, listening to different people, that sounds very familiar. It sounds like exactly why Governor Gavin Newsom says that he started his most recent podcast, which has obviously gotten quite a bit of attention. So first, I'm just curious, as governor, would you have a podcast? Maybe but I'm not gonna, I don't know if I'd have one or not. I haven't thought about it until the governor had his podcast. And let me be clear, I haven't listened to it. I heard it was very long, and I'm running for governor, and I'm focused on the challenges that people are facing. I'll say this, and let me be really clear about this. At the New York Times, you have David French, you have David Brooks, you have Bret Stephens. We know that William Kristol is a leading conservative leader. If I was going to have a conversation, I'd have a conversation with people that actually want to fix problems and have a view of the world. I wouldn't have a conversation about transgender, and I don't disagree with the governor on what he said. I disagree on where he said it. Charles Kirk, who calls people who are transgender predators? No. You don't sit down and have a conversation and then not challenge them. You challenge them. You have a decent conversation. Steve Bannon, people that don't believe that the election in 2020 was won by Biden and not correct them? I think, so, yes, you have those conversations. They're legitimate. I see some in the room. Legitimate Republicans who are decent, who have conservative views. Yes, I am talking about you too. decent people who I've worked with in the past and I respect. But no, people that want to demonize transgender, we can have different opinion. I believe in gender affirming care, but I don't believe taxpayers ought to pay for it when you're in prison. I'm sorry. But I wouldn't have that conversation with Charles Kirk. I'd have it with David French. I'd have it with people who are thoughtful, who you can have a conversation with and not just listen to them spew forth their lies.
But respectfully, Charlie Kirk and Steve Bannon, their podcasts are the podcasts that are reaching millions of people. David French, who's kind of seen as a never Trump Republican, I don't think you're necessarily talking to the MAGA wing of the party there, which is, I think, what the governor is trying to do. So are there red lines of people that you just don't want to be having these conversations with? How do you reach sort of adherence to President Trump if it sounds like you're saying
there wasn't a conversation? That's why, let's be clear. From everything I've read, there wasn't a conversation. Number one. And number two, yes, I will talk to their listeners because not every one of them, espouse the same views. A conversation is, standing up for your values. A conversation is challenging, misrepresentations of fact. But in a world where there's no fact, or some people believe there are no facts, you don't challenge it. So, I'm very clear about the fact that we should have those conversations. They're legitimate conversations that we ought to have with people who want a conversation, not with people who want to scream at you.
You did say that you didn't necessarily disagree with the governor in his comments with transgender student athletes. I'm just wondering if you can unpack that a bit more.
First of all,
what's your
what you start off with? It's a non-issue, everybody. There are 200,000 athletes playing college ball. There are a little less than 200 from what I understand. I don't know if they have an exact number, but a little less than 200. You do the math. It's a non-issue. That's what you start with. Second, to answer your question, do I believe that someone who's gone through male puberty is now, transgender woman should play other women? No, I don't. But that's a conversation I have with people that I respect. That's a conversation that you have with people that want to engage, that agree. That doesn't mean we can demonize them. It doesn't mean we can discriminate against them. It doesn't mean we can scapegoat them. It means we respect their decisions. It means that we work with them on gender-affirming care. But it doesn't mean that you're homophobic because you disagree on that issue, and you don't lead with that issue. People care, almost everybody, left and right. Housing is important. Good public schools are important. Safety is important. That's a non-issue, everybody. They spent $300 million on a non-issue, and we didn't respond. That's our problem. We didn't respond. And, not here to talk about the governor. I actually agree with the governor on a number of things. But I think he'll even admit, that without challenging lies and misrepresentations, that's not a conversation. That's just giving them a bigger microphone.
Speaking of microphones and conversations, Melanie, I'm going to let you land two more questions,
Perfect.
And then we're going to Q&A.
Terrific. You read my mind. And look, we got to talk about the elephant in the room, right? And by the elephant in the room, I mean the former vice president, who's not in the room, but is very much on everybody's minds. Vice President Harris, is she going to enter the governor's race? That is the question that we are all trying to find out. And I would say that your other candidates in the race have either been coy, or they have said things like it would have a near field clearing effect, I believe was the quote from Katie Porter. You have not been so coy. You have said that you're running no matter what. First of all, I want to make sure, am I characterizing that accurately? You're running no matter what?
I want to speak to the camera and to all the people watching and or listening. Read my lips. I'm in it to win it. I'm in it whether or not the former vice president comes in this race, because I have a record. I'm the only one that's ever been a CEO, not of a small town, but the largest city in this country. If the LA metropolitan area was a country, it'd be the 17th largest country in the world, or 18th maybe now. Let's be clear about that. I was Speaker of the Assembly as well. In both jobs, I actually did things. I can point to results. And I think that's the best way to point to what you're going to do. So yes, I'm in it no matter what. And actually, I would say this. The governor's race is not going to be a coronation. The governor's race is not a stepping stone to another job. If you want to be governor, any of the candidates, then get in the race. The time is now. The challenges are too big. We deserve a real conversation. We had a 100-day campaign. So no, you can't get in at the end of the rainbow. Get in now. Let's have that conversation. I look forward to it respectfully.
Okay,
that clear enough?
That was quite clear. Thank you for clarifying. So my last question, then we will throw it open to the audience. Then is, I understand, and you have talked about your record. It sounds like something you are very excited to run on. But let's be frank. If the former vice president gets in the race, she will have more name ID. She will most likely have better fundraising than you. How do you overcome those two factors to win this race?
I've been a giant killer before. 1994, I ran in a civil rights created district. It was not a Latino district. It was a civil rights created district. There were about 28% of the population. I was running against someone of European heritage, a good man. There were 6 Latino candidates in the race. I won by a lot. And then I ran again in 2001. I left the speakership with high approval ratings, but only 9% of the people knew me. 76% of the people knew him. A year later, I beat him in the primary. I lost in the runoff, primarily because they turned me into, it made me soft on crime. And 2005, I run against the guy who's now the mayor. I'm a council member. I get in a few days, 2 months before the deadline, in November. So in September, I was way down in the polls. The following March, I beat him in the primary and beat him in the runoff. I've done this before, everybody. I'm looking forward to this race, no matter who's in it. I respect all of the people in it. Let me just say that. Not just the vice president, Katie Porter, Tony Thurman, Betty Yee, Tony Atkins. I respect all of them. Because when you throw your hat in the ring, you're willing, to take the guff that comes with it. But I believe that I'm the best prepared on day one to lead the state to a better future. And so thank you.
All right, we're going to kick it open to audience questions now. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you.
And just so you know, I never left the building. We were here for you the whole time. Okay, if you have a question, I'm going to cover this front of the room, and Christie's can bring you the microphone. So questions, I know they're out there. I think I saw one. Well,
Please
otherwise,
introduce
I'm going to
yourself.
ask a question. Yeah, go ahead.
Please introduce yourself, state your name, and where you're from.
I'm Jeff Tartagia, an advocate, and I am born here in Sacramento. But as I say, I've been down in Los Angeles and in San Francisco, living around there. My question to you is, what do you think about the progressive Democrats?
Okay.
I don't take issue with progressives or conservatives. What I take issue with are ideologues. What I take issue with are people that are so rigid, they don't want to think out of the box. They don't believe that other people have viewpoints that might be helpful in solving a problem. So I don't have anything against progressives. I respect people who care about our democracy on both sides of the aisle. I respect people who want to be involved. I don't like screamers, no matter where they come from.
All right. Thank you. Next question. Otherwise, I'm going to ask one, and it's going to be hot. So, yes, coming over. And I learned from town halls, I hold on to the microphone.
Hi. What is your take on the previous election? A lot of the young people felt that we lost because we were not left enough, that we were not progressive enough. We left the unions behind. And I'm definitely very desperate in the next elections coming up as to come more left and more strong. So right now you don't look like a great candidate for me, and probably for a lot of young people, it's the same image. So how do you address those gaps? How do you get to the left? Do you want to get to the left, or, yeah?
Okay. Thank you.
I want to fix problems. Those solutions could come from the left, they can come from the middle, they can come from the right. I'll let you focus on that. I want to work with everybody, but I want to be judged by what I do, not theatrics, not what I say, not just what I say, but what I do. I think that's what we need to restore confidence in government again. Get things done. If you look at my record, I came out of the civil rights movement, okay? 25 years before I got elected. I was a labor leader. I was president of the ACLU. I was the guy taking on the prison industrial complex in the 1990s. The guys doing sensible gun control and gun safety laws in the 90s. The guy that opened it up on gay and lesbian civil rights. The guy who was talking about gay marriage in 1994 and married the two plaintiffs. When Kamala did in San Francisco, I did it, the two men, she did the two women. So I am unabashedly someone who's come out of a movement, not just out of college, and went to a professor and heard something and now want to scream? No, I came out of the movement. I am for getting things done. And yes, in a humane way, in a way that respects people, and in a way that brings them together. Because I think at the end, you want the same things I want, whether you're from the left or she's from the right. You want better schools for your kids. You want housing that you can afford. You want a job, you want an economy that works for all of us. You want to feel safe in your neighborhood. That isn't progressive and it isn't conservative. It's something we all want.
We have a question over here.
Over here. Yeah, thank you.
Hi, Mr. Mayor. I'm Alex Niles. I'm from the South Bay area originally. Last election, we saw increasing polarization by gender and by education and decreasing polarization by race. As one of our party leaders, what does that say about how our party needs to respond to those trends?
Yeah, you said it. When I ran for speaker, everybody wanted to make ado about the fact I was Latino. And I said, I'm not a Latino speaker. I want to be everybody's speaker. I want to be a uniter. When I ran for mayor, because I was breaking a glass ceiling, are you going to be a Latino mayor? No, I want to be everybody's mayor. Now, I'm proud of who I am. I'm a proud American whose family comes from Mexico, and I am proud. I speak Spanish, puedo hablar español, aunque nunca hablaba español en la casa. Aprendí el español defendiendo al inmigrante. No hablando del inmigrante, defendiéndolo por 25 años. So I stand up for the notion that we need uniters, no matter what race, no matter what sex, no matter what your orientation, no matter what your religion. Let's come together, everybody. Let's make California the golden state again. Not with talk, but with results.
All right, thank you. We have time for one more and then one more from Melanie. Yes, up here.
Hi, my name is Helen O'Connell, and I have been board chair of many different organizations, but most of them have been working for disability and seniors. And I am grateful that you've made this venue for us to be able, as normal, everyday public people, have this opportunity to meet you. I am very thankful that you've made this available. Thank you.
All right. I love that. That's a
Let
good
me just say
affirmation.
this. My sister worked for Protection and Advocacy. You know that organization? She was a lawyer and proudly represented the disabled community in the courts. I worked at the U.S. Equal Employment Opportunity Commission, investigating employment discrimination, including discrimination for disabilities. I can tell you, ma'am, I will always stand up for you. Not just scream, but get things done. Because I wouldn't have used that word normal. You're a human being with the same rights the rest of us have. And we need to respect some people are challenged physically or mentally. And we need to be there because we're a humane society. We're a caring society. Thank you very much.
All right. Amen. Melanie, would you like to land us with the last question? And then I'll close it out.
He was like, "Oh, I thought she was done."
No pressure.
Make it a doozy.
You know, this race is obviously not going to be about your predecessor, but I do think that it's helpful for us to maybe understand how you would approach being governor, to maybe do some comparisons to the current governor. And so first of all, I'm curious if you would give a letter grade to Governor Newsom as governor. You're apt for being in the UC. And if you can identify one decision that he has made during governing, not the podcast, that you would have done differently, what would that decision be?
Look, we'll leave it to the people of California to give him a grade. I'm not running against Gavin. I answered the question strongly because I believe strongly that podcast was a mistake. With respect to the governor, I think he's done a lot of things right. He's done some things wrong. I said, as an example, I thought we kept kids out of school too long. We kept them out for 18 months, everybody. Everybody else in the country opened them between 6 and 9 months. Kids didn't die disproportionately, neither did teachers. The fact is, when we did that, those same kids are going to be behind in the 3rd grade on reading. And what does that mean? I'll tell you what it means. It means that the 3rd grade is when you estimate how many people are going to be in the penitentiary after they're 18. When you can't read, more of them will be there. So that's an area. And actually, I'm not just opining now. I said something then. When Jonathan Chait wrote an article in the New York Times, a liberal writer, by the way, a progressive, okay, wrote an article and said, California has basically shame on you. You kept kids out for 18 months when the Republicans opened up their states and nobody died disproportionately. Nobody got more sick. And he said, and all I said was, I put up the article, and then I said one thing, open our schools now. Got 700,000 impressions. So I think a few people agreed with that. But I think the governor, on whole, he's done the best job he can. Don't have to agree with him on everything. I was honored and thankful that he picked me to be the infrastructure czar, that he took some of my recommendations, not all of them. I intend to do a lot more because I intend to make the crane the official bird of California when it comes to housing, when it comes to infrastructure, when it comes to schools, when it comes to ports, when it comes to airports. We're going to put people back to work building again in California. Thank you.
All right. Thank you both, great moderators, a bear and a Bruin. And a mom of two gauchos. Thank you for joining us. We're delighted to have you here. We're grateful, and we hope to get to see you again.
The Bruin is the little bear,
Oh, yeah.
but the school that more people apply to than anywhere in America.
All right. Thank you for coming today. Great to have you here.
You're the second.